When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone. Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, 2/3 of them American citizens, 1/3 aliens. We knew that some among them were potentially dangerous, but no one knew what would happen among this concentrated population if Japanese forces should try to invade our shores. Military authorities therefore determined that all of them, citizens and aliens alike, would have to move.
Hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about a very important time in American history. A story of how one man's conviction for his own life rippled out until it reached the Supreme Court, challenging the concepts of what we conceive to be freedom. Let's dive right in. Our story begins in 1942 in the midst of the Second World War. The United States had just been through the infamous Pearl Harbor bombings, and they recognized Japan as their enemy, as the Japanese were the perpetrators of these attacks.
Of the havoc wrought by the Japs' sneak sky and sea raid on Pearl Harbor, America's mid-Pacific naval bastion. On December 7th, 1941, Japan, like its infamous Axis partners, struck first and declared war afterwards. Costly to our Navy was the loss of war vessels, airplanes, and equipment. But more costly to Japan was the effectiveness of its foul attack in immediately unifying America in its determination to fight and win the war.
Now, the government was already very keen at pointing the finger and producing propaganda as a way to publicize the American war agenda to their own people. But after the event of Pearl Harbor, government's fear of the Axis powers would only become more and more extreme, especially when it came to Japan. The government's thought process was this:
well, Japanese people were the ones who bombed us at Pearl Harbor, so they're obviously our enemy. But wait a minute. There are Japanese people living in our country. So, that means all of them must be spies.
And so, this idea that all of these Japanese people who immigrated to America were somehow conspiring against America for the war effort was turned into a widespread propaganda itself. Until even the President, Franklin D. Roosevelt, signed Executive Order 9066, which said that all people of Japanese descent had to move out of their wonderful American homes that they worked so hard for, and move into internment camps, where they would be separated from their families and every other aspect of their lives. This leads us to the protagonist of today's video, Fred Korematsu, a 23-year-old American-born citizen. He was a Japanese American, but he enjoyed being a citizen of the country, and he wanted nothing more than to live freely. So you can imagine when he was informed that he was going to be sent to what was basically America's concentration camps, he refused to participate with any of it. Unfortunately, the rest of his family wasn't willing to step up to the wrongdoing being done to him, so they were all taken away from him and sent to one of the camps. Korematsu, though, stayed behind. He lived in California and became a welder, trying not to be seen in public or stand out too much. Eventually he was actually able to change his name to Clyde Sarah and get a fake ID, but apparently he tried too hard to not be recognized. One day he visited a plastic surgeon and requested for the man to make him look less Japanese. Clearly this was very suspicious to the plastic surgeon, because immediately after the fact he reported the strange incident, which led to Korematsu being officially arrested and placed in federal prison. In 1944, after Korematsu had spent 2 years in prison, he came to be represented in court by the American Civil Liberties Union, where he would reach the Supreme Court and basically be tried for being Japanese. Yeah. Him and his lawyers argued that Executive Order 9066 was inherently unconstitutional and violated his right to due process of the law, a clause within the Fifth Amendment. And also that, obviously, his loyalty to the United States was never in question, just like many other Japanese people who were taken in by camps just like him. But the U.S. argued that his fair treatment under the law was overruled by a state of national security during a war. Which, like I said, makes no sense considering Korematsu posed no actual threat to the country. Despite all their efforts, Korematsu was still found guilty, not being sent to prison, but instead to one of the Japanese internment camps in Utah. Fortunately, although this was very much a botched and unfair case, there was a little bit of remedy for it many years later. In the 1980s, Fred's conviction was finally overturned. And in 2018, the Supreme Court officially said the decision in Korematsu versus United States was wrong, even though they were ruling on a different case.
Korematsu, an American who wanted only to be treated like every other American, Fred Korematsu challenged our nation's conscience, reminding us that we must uphold the rights of our own citizens, even as we fight tyranny in other lands. Defying the 1942 order for the internment of Japanese Americans, he stood strong against anti-Asian prejudice in the United States during World War II. Convicted of violating the order, he waited more than 40 years for justice, when a federal court overturned the judgment that the Supreme Court first upheld against him. A man of quiet bravery, Fred Korematsu deserves our respect and thanks for his patient pursuit to preserve the civil liberties we hold dear.